Greetings, comrades, and welcome back to the eastern border. I'm sitting here in Peel, freezing my ass off in this damn Latvian winter that never seems to end even though it literally just started, while staring at the script on my screen. It's quite likely that Evita is going to kill me for working too slow and not sleeping enough. And if she finds out I spilled beer on my keyboard again, well then, I'm just a dead man instantly. And the worst part isn't the mess, it's that I have one less beer. You see, the news are special and required beer, and they just won't wait. And neither will the sheer unadulterated madness coming out of the Kremlin and Washington. You too probably will need a beer for this episode. It's day 1368 of this endless bloody clown show, and the Western media, bless their naive corporate plastic hearts, just exploded with the news that Donald Trump administration has developed a new peace plan for Ukraine. A 28-point plan to end the war, they claim. The information appeared literally within hours and events began to unfold rapidly. They want this thing signed now. The United States wants Zelensky's signature by Thanksgiving, November 27th. That's less than a week, folks. They want this peace treaty gift-wrapped in human skin and tied with a bow of shattered geopolitical norms. Sources from the Washington Post say the deadline might stretch to 2 weeks, but the message is clear. The clock is ticking louder than a Fab 3000 bomb in a crowded room. Just a couple of days ago, few believed that Washington was actually ready to pressure Kiev for a deal with the Kremlin. But already, we found out that Kiev officially confirmed receiving the draft peace agreement from the United States. Volodymyr Zelensky's office announced that the Ukrainian side had received the draft plan from the Americans and agreed to work through its points to, quote, end the war with dignity. Dignity. Yeah, I think that word is now just a smudge on a discarded napkin in a DC steakhouse. Now, this whole plan crawled out of the swamp just like some mutant three-headed snake. Initially, the appearance of this plan looked mysterious. Everyone initially assumed that it was an unofficial initiative, a kind of a private conspiracy between United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Putin's pet emissary Kirill Dmitriev. We didn't know if Trump or Secretary of State Marco Rubio even knew what time zone they were in, but the stench of collusion was very real. In late October, Dmitriev, the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund and a known Putin suck-up, did indeed meet Witkoff in Florida for 3 days, not very secretly, to quote-unquote discuss ideas for peace. Dmitriev was ecstatic, chirping to Axios, "We feel that the Russian position has truly been heard." His optimistic leaks about the content of the negotiations caused a stir, but many decided it was just someone's solo performance. However, it was later revealed that this was not a private project at all, but a full-fledged United States plan for Ukraine, approved at the highest level. The White House confirmed that work on such a plan had been quietly underway for about a month. Trump's special representative Steve Pyatt and Rubio were reportedly secretly crafting this accord, interacting with both conflicting countries. And Donald Trump himself personally supports this fucking garbage. His press secretary, Caroline Levitt, announced this, emphasizing that the plan allegedly, quote, takes into account the realities of the situation, end quote, and should be mutually acceptable, where both sides get more than they give up. Now, let's just cut the crap and call it what it is. Washington and Moscow prepared the draft deal behind Ukraine's back and only presented Kiev with a fait accompli. I mean, I haven't closed my eyes in like 72 hours just to track this rancid order of sovereignty being assassinated by so-called allies. When the cards were revealed in Washington, it turned out that the plan indeed contained 28 specific points covering key aspects of war and peace. The United States are immediately trying to push it through on Kiev. An American delegation led by Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll hurriedly flew to Ukraine on November the 20th and presented the document to Volodymyr Zelensky. It's a classic game of good cop, bad cop. Trump's special representative Steve Pyatt plays the heavy pressuring and threatening Zelensky, while Driscoll plays the good cop making concessions. Zelensky, relying on that Kryvyi Rih school of diplomacy, as the Z channels love to sneer, is doing a political high-wire act. After the meeting, he did not reject the idea. On the contrary, he publicly announced his readiness to work with Washington on this plan. According to Zelensky, the teams will work on the points to end war, and Kiev is ready for constructive, honest, and fast work, end quote. He only emphasized that he had outlined Ukraine's principal positions, the red lines. This obviously refers to the territory and security guarantees. But overall, the signal from Zelensky is not denial, but cautious agreement to discuss terms. But Washington obviously is not playing nice. Sources report powerful United States pressure on Kiev. Washington is allegedly hinting to Zelensky that he is obliged to accept this plan. Reuters writes that the United States made it clear to Kiev that the Ukrainian side would have to agree to terms that propose territorial concessions and army limitations. Zelensky is now making some impossible choices. Just like I often have to decide if I want to risk asking Evit to make me a sandwich at some moment. Tension reigns in Kiev's corridors of power. Ukrainian officials say that many points of the plan are unacceptable to them, and that much should be obvious. Kiev is currently preparing counter-proposals. It's reminiscent of the famous resource deal, wouldn't you agree? And here's an interesting point. The plan, published in the media, is noticeably different from the alarming leaks that circulated initially. This is likely because the first rumors came in from Kirill Dmitriev, reflecting the most pro-Russian version of the deal. At the time, there were talks of almost complete capitulation by Ukraine. The Financial Times warned that the proposals were very convenient for Putin. It was reported that the Ukrainian army would be cut by more than a half, limited to no more than 400,000 soldiers, and deprived of long-range weapons. Obviously, such a plan would be catastrophic for European security, and that's something that I agree with literally every other expert around. It's no wonder that over here in Europe everyone got seriously alarmed. The French foreign minister immediately declared that peace cannot mean capitulation. However, surprisingly enough, the actual text turned out to be softer. The document Kiev saw differs from Dmitriev's draft. One could even say that the current American plan is in some ways more advantageous for Ukraine than previously discussed agreements, such as the Istanbul ones. Now, I know this might sound weird, but let's take a look at this sick, twisted mathematics. See, first of all, there's army size. In Istanbul 2022, Russia demanded that the Ukrainian army would not exceed 85,000. The current plan proposes a limit of 600,000 military personnel. And the nuance here is that this is huge. I mean, it's about 2.5 times more than Ukraine had before the war. For reference, in 2021, the strength of the Ukrainian armed forces was about 2,500,000. Thus, even after a reduction, Ukraine's army will be significantly more powerful than before the war. Moreover, very few armies in the world, well, we're not counting China and the United States, but very few other armies in the world actually have 600,000 personnel in peacetime. And there's also the interesting fine print there, because the limit only concerns regular troops, and, unlike the Istanbul one, imposes no restrictions on the National Guard, police, reservists, private military companies, or, let's just say, other security structures. And, when talking about weapons, this time there are no direct prohibitions on armaments on the long-range devices, which is much better than Istanbul for Ukraine. And with NATO? Yeah, the restriction is that NATO will not place its bases and contingents on Ukrainian territory. It's just a weird mess. It's a political enigma, though. Ukraine must give up land voluntarily and cement its non-block status. But it's not pure capitulation, I would say. It's a bitter compromise, leaving Ukraine much more than it gives up. Now, Washington is trying to present it as a win. Obviously, I do have to state here that, according to the last few days, it seems to me that, indeed, Putin wants to be Trump, but sadly, he can only manage to be a bit of a Medvedev. And, Medvedev at least has the excuse when he's doing stupid shit, he's blind drunk and probably on a bender for 2 weeks straight. Meanwhile, Trump has the advantage that he doesn't need to, since he's, naturally talented in these matters. But still, this was quite shocking. Of course, we have now sources who claim that the security guarantees spelled out in the plan are literally NATO Article 5 only slightly modified. It means that the Russian attack on Ukraine will be considered a threat to the entire transatlantic community with a corresponding military response from the West. This, by the way, is a major breakthrough because the United States has always shielded away from security guarantees that would involve American troops. But you have to remember why we're being skeptical. After all, Budapest Memorandum also existed. And, well, that turned out to be just a little piece of paper. Kind of stupid, isn't it? And, well, in the meantime, we also seen a lot of United States politicians criticizing this action. Another option, by the way, which is just a side note that I have to mention before I talk about anything else, is the fact that this might as well exist only because to draw your attention away from Epstein files, and that whole affair. I was sitting here in Latvia and was quite surprised when Congress passed it, and then I watched the rebound, and then the Senate passed it, and oh boy, all that stuff is now getting interesting. But to finish this one up, we need to talk about the punchline, comrades. The reason this entire circus is just utterly doomed from the start, no matter how outraged you are, and you should be. However, well, nothing will come of it, because, this plan is utterly impossible for Putin to accept. And this might shock you. I know. A lot of experts and everything say that this plays straight into Putin's hands, and I understand fully why you would think so. But, well, for that I also have an answer, since yesterday I posted a great stream on my YouTube channel. Please go and check it out, because slightly before this, there were two channels, Warfronts in English by Simon Whistler and his team, and Michael Mackey, and they both posted about whether or not Europe is ready for war, and they came to very different conclusions, and the fact that you can see both of these aspects together shows the dissonance and the issues with miscommunication, and how we really need to improve cultural understanding and, well, listen to each other a bit more. If you haven't seen that one or listened to that, well, it's 4 hours long, but please, save some time, find the Eastern Border on YouTube, and then click. It's the latest live stream, last one. I actually managed the tabs there so that you can go and click it. That'll give you a hint of explanation why many people don't understand why Putin will never accept this deal. But, well, we're a bit different. See, the problem with this plan is the fact that none of the goals that Russia set are being achieved in it. The Kremlin started the war, let me remind you this, comrades, under the slogans of denazification and demilitarization. Let us just ignore for a second that no one knows what the hell that does even mean. Well, denazification, that is. Demilitarization, But the Ukrainian army will be 2.5 times larger and fully re-equipped by NATO standards. What is this disarmament? I mean, if the army gets larger than it was at the beginning of the war. And the territory? The status of the 4 annexed regions, which Moscow proclaimed Russian forever in their constitution, it's not cemented. It's only stated that the United States de facto recognizes Russian Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk. Kherson and Zaporizhia regions are not given to Moscow at all. It is proposed to freeze the front along the current line without legal recognition. And let's not forget that what Putin thinks is the current line, and what actually is happening due to the twisted nature of how those military maps are made on the Russian side, and how delusional they all are. Vatniks scream about this every single day and complain that nothing's right about this, and oh boy, that picture also is just weird. I mean, if these lines, they will have to be, if they're frozen right now, they will have to be, closed down on the actual line of combat. And then, some heads will definitely roll once Putin understands that, nope, those villages and towns and parts of cities, that they're actually not under his control. And, oh boy, that could cause a mess. Of course, all the Vatniks, like Maxim Kalashnikov and everyone else whom I have quoted for such a long time, they will also just treat it as a horrible loss. I have, by the way, a full-on episode with Lev Vershilin that I will be watching on my next stream. It's just that this episode took a lot to make and analyze, because insane amounts of sources. So we skipped over that one, but oh boy, they already are not happy. They, and you again will be shocked, call this a capitulation, but by Russian side, except like a hidden soft landing capitulation. Is that just weird? I'm feeling like, really, Epstein file backup was just weird, because this one gets signed. And now we come to the even trickier part. The situation with Donetsk. You see, Ukraine withdraws troops from areas like Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, and, well, this zone, according to the whole thing, becomes a demilitarized buffer zone under Russian control. De facto, Russia takes the Donbass, but it undertakes to demilitarize this zone. No large Russian forces can be there. In all other directions, Moscow must withdraw troops from all captured territories in the unlisted 5 regions. This means a withdrawal from the Kharkiv region. Russians recently threatened to take Kupiansk, but according to this, they will now have to roll it back. And the final nail in the coffin, which, everything else just could have been written over there, but everyone who knows at least the tiniest amount about Russian economy knows what's up here. Reparations. The plan explicitly mentions the $100 billion of frozen Russian assets that will go to boost the Russian economy. Moreover, the United States wants to take 50% of the profits from these investments. Essentially, Russia is being forced to pay reparations in a veiled form, and, that didn't go unnoticed by the Vatnik crowd. When $100 billion? Well, that's enough to buy literally every house in Latgale, all of them together, and still have money left over to bribe God himself. The thought of Putin having to swallow this failure is the only thing keeping me awake. This absolutely does not look like a victory for the Kremlin in their own eyes. See, you might be more shocked because you're used to, more normal terms and normal things happening. But again, this is why I made that long stream last night. Seriously, go watch it. I would very much appreciate it. But Putin, if this would go through, Putin would have to explain to his people, and all of them who returned from the war, wounded and damaged, and all those crazy Vatniks building militias, that millions of soldiers died, the economy was destroyed, and Soviet stocks were burned, just so Ukraine could remain undefeated. No Odessa, no Kiev, no Lviv, dreams of Novorossiya gone, Transnistria is still about to die, nothing. So what gives? And here I was just shocked about this whole mess because it's stupid no matter how you look at this. Like, in every possible form. It's made to look threatening in the West, but if you look even slightly deeper beyond the surface, you understand that this is going to be very hard to sell as a victory, and everyone's going to be pissed about this in Russia. So it gives. See, I sort of feel, and this is, this is pure speculation because, I don't know, I'm trying to make an educated guess here, but this entire Dmitry Witkov's scribble, I feel, was a Russian attempt to shift blame onto Ukraine. See, I feel like, based on the previous actions, it seems to me that they wanted the plan to look so repulsive to Kiev that Zelensky would refuse outright. And then Trump would point the finger and say, okay, the problem is Ukraine, we'll cut off aid. But the plan has backfired because it's actually so unacceptable for Russia. The United States is holding the cards now. When Moscow refuses, Washington will likely pressure Moscow through new sanctions. The United States Treasury has already stated openly that it's time to immediately stop the slaughter. Agree to a truce. And even if sanctions are lifted, it won't save the Russian economy anyways. Yeah, that's the end part of yesterday's stream too. It's in a state of stagnation and degradation. Technology is decades back behind, and, economist Lipsitz said that they're evolving backwards. The budget is cracking. Washington openly states they will continue to financially suffocate the Russian war machine if the Kremlin doesn't play ball. And I definitely am going to have to check on how this is treated, and, we'll see where this goes with all the Vatniks, because it's a very divisive and idiotic plan. But Zelensky, with agreeing to negotiate this stuff and having some time, I believe he understands this because, currently it's a play of the usual with Trump. We're on that little stage where the last person with whom Trump spoke with is his best friend, and he goes and does that thing, and then, we just have to wait until the ping pong ball moves to the other side of the court, and then it's going to be okay. Because again, I highly doubt anything will come of this, and no, there won't be any peace. Definitely not by these standards, because if this actually happens, Girkin already is definitely writing messages about this, which I'm going to read to you in the next episode, And we will definitely be yet another tiny little step closer to the inevitable civil war in Russia, which is by all means going to happen when their economy crashes, because it's already in the process of being utterly destroyed. But that's not the only thing that I wanted to talk about here in this episode, surprisingly enough. And it took me a lot of effort and thinking about this. But listen, comrades, and this time listen well, because surprisingly enough, I've actually listened to you, and for the first time ever, I've actually put effort in this mid-roll ad segment, which I'm not sure I enjoyed it at all. So, shilling time. I'm sorry about this, but hey, maybe this works. Did this as a creative exercise in between doing all the translations and analysis. So, if you want me to keep freezing in this sauna, as the guys on the Shill stream said, decoding the insane ramblings of Zedvatniks so you don't have to, and pointing out where, in general, our society could improve in some ways in understanding each other, well then, it would be nice if you'd help me out a bit, and massive thank you to all those who already do. First, go to patreon.com/theeasternborder, and it would be nice if you'd throw a few bucks in the hat. Keeps the lights on, vodka flowing, and Evita happier than usual. Okay, not vodka. I don't drink vodka. I drink beer, but vodka fit better in the sentence. And second, if you want to wear your cynicism on your sleeve, check out our merch store at theeasternborder-shop.fourthwall.com, or go to the pinned post on theeasternborder.lv. We've got memberships which are set amount of money per month, unlike Patreon, which is per episode, and Patreon's a bit weird anyways. We've got shirts, we've got things that will confuse your neighbors and quite likely alarm your local government. And yeah, those Club of Angry Patriots things, all of that money goes to Ukraine. And finally, if you just want to cut out the middleman and send direct aid to the Kristaps Survival Fund over here on the Eastern Border, literally, go to theeasternborder.lv and just click that beautiful, beautiful donate button. It's literally calling for you. And, help a podcaster out, Because if I run out of coffee and beer, then the Vatniks win. And we can't have that, can we? And now back to the horror show, because, we have other situations to discuss, which might be interesting on the Russian side. Welcome back to the freezing point. You just heard why this peace plan is a joke. But to truly understand why Putin is in this corner, you have to look past the diplomats and the suits and look at the Mad Max reality of his army. I swear, looking at these reports makes me want to move to the woods and live with the bears. Currently, I live next to them, but, at one point, might as well move in. On November 11th, a video of Russian troops entering Pokrovsk went viral on Telegram channels almost simultaneously. Arguably one of the most striking videos of this war. Heck, even I made a YouTube short about this. It was strange. In just under 40 seconds, the cameraman shows soldiers entering the Ukrainian city, not in tanks or armored personal carriers, but in vans and civilian cars with sawn-off roofs and doors. For those who don't closely follow the war, this short clip truly makes a strong impression. It's no joke. It's like the second army in the world, was formed by a bunch of alcoholics and homeless people. Moreover, the Russian troops look humiliatingly bad, not compared to, say, the American army, but even compared to the Taliban and Tuaregs fighting in slippers and Toyota Hilux. But, and this, by the way, is critical, this actually is no reason for gloating or rejoicing. The army remains just as deadly and, it's still advancing, taking huge losses which Putin doesn't care about, kills civilians with rockets, and, they are, I feel, they're going to be likely to take complete control of the ruins of Pokrovsk, which is slowly grinding out. Pretty nasty. Not that it, like I always say, is going to change much with their own destiny, which is inevitable civil war and economic collapse, but it's still awful because more Ukrainian civilians are going to die. See, all this sort of good side of being able to show at least something is precisely why the Z channels actually were not shy at all about posting these videos. And, listen to the rhetoric straight from the Z-Sphere viewer swamp. The author of the channel, War Gonzo, wrote breathlessly, quote, "The spectacle is certainly impressive. You wouldn't be surprised if a cart loaded with soldiers and electronic warfare systems showed up, and the horse harnessed to it clattered along the road. That's how history grinds in creeks. History grinds on a donkey cart, apparently. At least it's better than in a traditional Russian folktales where the little fool Ivan sits on a stove. A contributor to the channel Witnesses of Bayraktar agrees with him. Quote, in the most dangerous direction, there are no gleaming armored vehicles. Instead, you will be greeted by thousands of exhausted people traveling on all types of wheeled transport. End quote. The video's essence was best summarized by the Israeli military analyst Yigal Levin. Quote, those on motorcycles and beat-up cars are ready to die. It doesn't matter whether they do it on their own free will or were forced to. A soldier is required to kill and be ready to die. End quote. And yeah, the only and primary reason this army is advancing at all is Ukraine's shortage of men. When there's miles and miles of empty space, what difference does it make who's driving a tank, a jalopy, or even a donkey? But here's the nuance that will make your brain scream. You can't judge the army's lethality from this video. You can judge something more important. Tied to the economy, we're talking about the state of the Russian military-industrial complex. Military expert Vlad Shurigin, host of the Z channel Ramzai, summed it up perfectly. Quote, the incoming unit didn't have a single piece of standard military equipment, only homemade tachankas in the style of Mad Max, covered jeeps and cars and motorcycles. End quote. And where are the products of Russian military-industrial complex? Where are the was? The war has been going on for almost 4 years, but the Russian Ministry of Defense has still not managed to establish production of the light, inexpensive, and most importantly, mass-produced tachankas, all-terrain vehicles, and buggies that are in dire need at the front. Instead, the Russian GABTU continues to order armored dinosaurs from the auto repair shops, huge and clumsy, priced astronomically, which, quote, don't even come within cannon shot of the line of contact, as they will be immediately destroyed. These are, quote, pretty toys for the rear guard and military police. Well, meanwhile, unsurprisingly, the front is fully 100% supplied by volunteers. Soldiers buy buggies, hold was, ladas, and motorcycles with their own pocket money, and, the stuff that they get for being wounded. And here's the scam, comrades. The Russian government spends 6% of GDP on military needs. Well, the official part, actual amount is 40%, but, much of it is being stolen, and that's a huge, huge problem there. The problem is that the Russian government also spends almost as much as the United States does on debt maintenance. Yeah, because unlike USA, Russia gets its debt in an extremely expensive fashion. They're now selling 15% interest rate bonds. 10 years, by the way. 10-year governmental bond, 15% interest rate. They've gotten to that point. And despite all of the fact that they have trouble with the funding, they're throwing money at it, whatever they have, despite all of their efforts, well, the front lines are still being moved by volunteers using collected public funds. This is a fundamentally important question in the fourth year of the war. The Russian army is adapting purely out of a basic animalistic desire to survive and not much else. And you see, if you want to survive, you weld barbecue grills onto your tank, line it with logs, and wrap it in barbed wire. Why? Well, because the factory that actually produced your tank doesn't have a goal of survival. Its goal is just to fulfill the plan. Report to superiors, make a profit, embezzle something. Pretty neat. Everything effective in this war, aside from geranium drones and Cobb bombs, as Vatniks put it, grows from below. Listen to this damning list from a former fighter, the author of the channel Morpech Rokot. He lists the products made by, as he calls it, people's military-industrial complex, specifically civilian ones. Video interception systems, civilian. Drone detectors, civilian. Firmware that 1001, all sorts of things, that is what the entire front line flies on, with the FPV drones, civilian. Evacuation equipment, all civilian. Electronic warfare systems, because military electronic warfare was not designed for drones. Yeah, that's all civilian. FPV kamikaze drones with different transmitters. Oh, that also civilian. Heck, even ponchos, civilian. Medkits, civilian. Everything. The military is literally begging. When will the drones finally appear in the front lines? Where are the drones that carry the TMKIs? They have videos of the official S-80 drones produced by the Russian government taking off and flipping over. Former PR man and drone operator Platon Mamantov warned already in May, quote, "In 3 years of war, our beloved motherland hasn't created an alternative to DJI Mavics. The front is heavily dependent on the single foreign company. And now? Well, now, Mamantov answers, there are no birds, and the ones that are there cost as much as a fucking Boeing. The colossal expenditures primarily ensure the well-being of those employed in the military-industrial complex. But the effectiveness of the war is driven by the simple self-preservation instinct of Russian soldiers. And the military-industrial complex, they're in a mode of steal everything that's not nailed down because we're about to close shop. And, of course, all this rot, this systemic corruption, extends to the people. The so-called veterans of the special military operation are unwanted by literally anyone in power as well. Think about how that impacts this people's military-industrial complex. The author of the channel Two Majors delicately tries to formulate this thought. In 2022, the authorities watched the storming of Upper Lars by hipsters when they were fleeing the conscription. In 2023, officials fled Moscow during the Prigozhin mutiny. So the presidential program Time of Heroes appeared, meant to be a glorious new path for veterans to become the new wave of managers. But what's the reality? The brutal truth is that 70% of the participants in the regional stage of Time of Heroes are either under the threat of being declared AWOL, or Soch in Russian, or under the threat of being transferred far, far away. Why? Because the command received no legal clarifications about how to send active servicemen to do any studying. Commanders are simply declaring them deserters. The Two Majors lament that civilian officials don't understand military mechanisms. Without arbitration from Moscow, dialogue is simply impossible. The fighting frontline author, Vatnik from the Z channel Vozhak, reminds us that the Ministry of Defense is engaged in corruption, not supply. He remembers entering in 2022 with monolith body armor weighing 17 kilograms. Quote, "The great and infallible ministry didn't have lightweight plates. Volunteers brought them. Then the war of drones began. And again, volunteers brought them." Vozhak screams, "We haven't taken Pokrovsk yet, if anything. We've been fighting over it for a year now. With a rear like this, we won't win the war." And what about this new elite that Putin declared to be, his new cadre of officers? 5 others in the Angarsk prison torture case had their charges terminated because they enlisted in the war in Ukraine. These developers, prisoners who tortured cellmates in collusion with the administration, well, they are now the new heroes. At least one died at the front, but the others continued to live and face no punishment. Meanwhile, military volunteer Alexei Zhizhov, even knowing all this, is still somehow surprised to find out what the country he lives in. He talks about the new recycling fee on cars and, the increase of value-added tax. Recycling fee is what Russia puts on imported cars just to collect them. It's called utilsbor. Basically, if you buy foreign cars, the Russian government is technically supposed to take them away after you change them or crash them and then dispose of them, and this tax is supposed to cover that, but of course, it's just a fucking luxury tax. But luxury itself in Russia is no longer yachts and Maybachs. Under this Putin's regime, luxury is, quote, having your own apartment, a car, a smartphone, a laptop, driving on the road in that same car, and parking in the city. That is the luxury that they are taxing now. The government decided to collect the lion's share of money from those 140 million, well, on paper 140 million, now it's way less, who have 20% of GDP among them, rather than the elites, because it's safer. The masses are not considered a dangerous social force when it comes to this. Mobilization? That would be very different, though. But this, taking more money from them? Nah, that's fine. Even the 2026 elections are not an obstacle. Mobilization really is. Zhivov asks, has anyone calculated the capacity of the layman's pocket? In 2021, 40% of households were below the point of quote-unquote financial reproduction. And how about now? Well, now it's getting worse. Now it's getting so horrid that even people on Tsargrad TV state that the collapse has already started. I mentioned this late on the stream yesterday, and I will pester you about this because, for one, it is really valuable for everyone to go in and check that one out.
Oh yeah, and tomorrow when I'll be streaming the other stuff, I have a cat now, and you'll be able to see her. If that doesn't get me more views, I don't know it will. So I don't know. This whole peace deal, Putin can't sign it because he requires volunteers who are these active Z members to kind of support him. It looks like a loss and brings Russia closer to civil war. The whole peace deal is a sham. And the situation in Russia, well, yeah, they'll probably take Pokrovsk at some point. But again, ask yourselves, what is that going to change? It's going to change something only in the minds of those people who see nothing more than lines on maps and who put great care in not caring about this whole war situation. To be honest, well, I understand why Ukrainians don't like this because it's their lives at the line. But in global scale, Russia is doomed anyways. And again, even if official Zargrad TV channels who are pure propaganda machines state that the collapse is inevitable and the economy is already being destroyed, well, then there is something. I mean, again, Russia has so much debt management that you'd be surprised because this is something that I hadn't heard ever. Russia decided that they want to release more bonds denominated in Chinese yuans. Why? Well, because remember they used to sell a lot of stuff to China, but the yuan, just like the Indian rupee, is not fully convertible, you see. There are some issues with that. So what they did is they need money for the budget, so they will just forcibly sell those yuan bonds to their own local businesses. Yeah. Why? Well, because they're needed, apparently. Denominating things in yuans. Just, that's new. And that's like the ultimate point, comrades. High-ranking brass, those assholes at the top of Russia, don't value people's lives at all. They don't even care to help Vatniks win. They want to look good on paper and make sure everything looks like beautiful and nice. They're interested in two things. Being viewed as this religious figure, because that's like for the peasants and part of their propaganda, this Russia's religious experience that I keep yapping about all the time. By the way, I'm going to have a talk about that on spy podcast, Secrets and Spycraft. I think we'll be talking about that, but that's in January. Well, at least they would like to pretend to the normal people that they care about this divinity and all this stuff. Maybe Putin does. Who knows? Maybe he's senile too. But most of the higher ups, yeah, they're interested in nothing but their own earnings. Even when the Russian soldiers died in droves, for the sake of that very earnings, and if you remember the stream that we did together with Evita, well, they themselves stated that if the Russian soldier who is this fanatical Vatnik comes back home and finds out that that was the only thing he fought for, and not this mysterious divine empire, well, then shit'll hit the fan. And it's exactly what's going to happen. So, the ultimate point is something that we always ask. Any normal person would just be confused about why then, if economy is destroyed and country is getting destroyed and everything's getting worse in Russia, why do these people keep dying and killing? And they started this war, and what the fuck is going on? Well, sadly, there is no rational answer. There is nothing, because it's a religious aspect and 25 years of propaganda. There is no proper answer to satisfy you. I have been trying to give it to you for all these years, but, I can provide as much evidence as I want. In a lot of cases, there are still people out there who would just disbelieve me. So we're all left with just the cold wind, crappy coffee, and the endless meat grinder in the Russian-Ukrainian war. And that'll be it for today. I need to go and eat something and get to bed before everything gets too angry. До свидания, товарищи. And as usual, remember, happiness is mandatory.